All right. Here we go. So, we talk about the Billionaires Platform. If you say, what do you do? Well, you know how billionaires make their money, right? No. Well, they build platforms, and they offer people a few perks, and the people run to these platforms for the perks. You know, companies like Amazon, Facebook, Airbnb, Uber. You could say, listen, when people say, well, I wouldn't be interested in this, you're already doing it. I mean, who's not on one of those platforms? Like, I just love what's happened to our business because we've gone enough mainstream to where we're doing what everybody's already doing. We're just doing it differently than how the billionaires do it. Because we're beginning with a different end in mind. Tina was up here and she was talking about profits and people. When you care about profits first, yeah, you're going to serve the customer, offer them a few perks. But you're not going to cut them in on the special deal. You're not going to cut them in on and they'll say, besides, the people don't care anyway. All they want to do is drink beer, watch football, whatever else. And that they don't care. So as long we'll just give them a few perks and we'll just take all the money even though it's all coming from them to begin with. And then with the financial matrix, if we ever run into any problems, we'll just print money for our side and the people will take it on the chin. They always do. They said, I was reading a historian, he said, the trouble with historians is the more history they read, the harder it is to stay an optimist. I've read a lot of history. And you say, well, then why are you still optimistic? Because every single time there was any real change, it was when a group of people got together and they were so convicted that enough is enough. And it starts to turn the tide in the whole society. As long as we believe that this is okay and that, oh yeah, and then your part, see, what we're going to do is we'll throw you a few perks. We're going to take the billions and everybody's going to be happy. Just go to bed and imagine that steak is real. And then, Chris and Terry, and Lori and myself, we've dealt with this system. We know some of those billionaires. We saw what went on behind closed doors. And for a while, it messed me up. For a while, it messed me up because I said, I can't believe that they would do that. And then after a little bit longer, I said, I think God showed me that for a reason. And so either I can have, on one side, I can get bitter. On the other side, I can get better. And when you see all these people and you hear all these stories and you realize, oh, wait a minute, what's going on over here is the same thing that's going on over here. You start, and then when for some reason you're trained as a systems engineer, you figure out, why, this is systematic. Why, this is a whole plan to do this to people. So what could we do? Well, why don't we recreate that system? Because the idea of a platform, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great idea. And bringing the people and providing perks, there'll be plenty of customers that won't go out and build the business, and that's fine. In other words, when we invite you to be part of the people's platform, listen, you stayed for the ticket holder, so I'm kind of assuming that you must actually want to make a pipeline income. But if you said, no, not really, I just love the community, and I just want to enjoy the perks, then, man, we're never going to, it's like if you're satisfied with what you're getting out of this, then we're satisfied because we're doing it to see you guys get what you want. What I don't want to see is sit there, it's like Lori and I are, hey, thank you for letting us go to the moon and back. Well, you guys eat moon pie. I'm like, listen, if you want to go to the moon, then come with us. Because you're going to have the exact same opportunity that Lori and I have. Now, if somebody in the room goes and does 10 times more work and builds 10 times bigger pipelines, of course they're going to make more than you. We're not talking communism here. We're not talking about hating on, here's what we hate. We don't like fraud. We don't like abuse. We don't like oppression. We don't like force. We believe people ought to be free to do what they want to do. And so this profits coming back is a huge part of this. What I'm trying to tell you is whether you come and say, but I didn't put any money into this, and yet you're kind of, in a sense, because of how the compensation was structured systematically, is that you're an owner of something, and yet you treat it like you're a customer of something. Now, honestly, not everybody. There's a few people in here that are treating it like owners. You heard Raymond and Tina up here, and there's many more, and we've mentioned some of the names, and I'm sure I missed some names, but you know who you are. And I saw some of the new turbos going across stage, and I saw some people making commitments, but you own something here because you're part of the people. And what we want to do is systematically say, if the people want to come in and do just nothing besides enjoy the perks, great, they're going to get perks. And one of the biggest perks is Bitcoin, and here's why. Because it's the people's money. What do you mean by the people's money? And that's not a term I come up with. You could go read it and say, the people's money. What do you mean by the people's money? Well, when you hold dollars in your hand, if anybody else has noticed, those dollars start decreasing. Okay, I'm not even going to cover this slide because everybody knows this one's true. I want to explain where that 45-year plan come from. Every time you see the plan in the open, you see that 45-year plan. I want to back that up with something that had nothing to do with the 45-year plan. This graph was from Pew Research. It's in the Exposed book. To me, this is one of the biggest smoking guns on the financial matrix. And if you missed it, go back and study this slide and read the little bit I talked about it on. Because what this does is they were trying to make a separate point and talking about 1973, but they missed their own graph. When you actually look at the data, if you draw the point where the line from productivity increases, Americans have been still growing their productivity the same as they did before 1971. But something happened in 1971, and all of a sudden, even though the productivity continued to increase, the pay raises didn't. Something changed in 1971. Does anybody know what changed in 1971? The gold standard disappeared, which means every time we produce more, they produce enough money to take it all from you. And we're supposed to say, oh, good, we live in America, we're free. That was true before 1971. I was 4 years old when they took my freedom theoretically. Now they're taking it in reality. It's not just my freedom. It's not just your freedom. It's all those people out there that are unaware. And we can sit here and say, oh, it's a good thing we know. We're going to build this, but we're going to keep it a secret little club. Then we'd be just like the billionaires. If you don't share the 5 Ps. When you see that 45-year plan since 1971, that's been a flat line, even though your productivity is well over 2.3. It's over double the productivity while the income hasn't, which means Americans get to work harder and Canadians, they work harder, but because of the inflation, all the costs are going up while your actual pay is not going up, which means that people are tapping into, well, my mom and dad gave me a house that was owned for, but now I'm going to put a mortgage on it. And you know what happened to houses? 50% of the value in the houses got gutted, and they borrowed against things that used to be owned and now are loaned. What is going on? Look at this. Right there, you see this in every plan. Do you notice the year? 1971, it was 100%. Do you notice? Now, this stops in 2008. We're going to finish this because it's gone down another 50. Like this number here goes from 100%. By the time it's done today, it's less than 10%. That means if you had 100,000 saved, if your grandpa put 100,000 in bank and said, I'm just going to give him 100,000 cash. And if he had 100,000 in cash in 1971, he saved it to today and handed you that 100,000, it'd be like him handing you 10,000. Because 90% of every dollar that was saved got gutted. 90%. So you say, why are you interested in Bitcoin, Orrin? I'll tell you why. Because what Bitcoin does is, just one more graph, just to back up, because I want people to understand, I'm not making this up. This is the business, household, and federal government debt. Do you notice the year where it started spiking? Bueller. You will find that it happens in 1971. In 1971, the gap started. Now, I said theoretically, because remember, even though the system absolutely changed, the first people that were using it were still stuck in the old paradigm that you can't do it that way. So they were still living under a paradigm of the gold standard, even though there was no gold standard. Do you think that's happening near the end? Do you think anybody's saying, oh, gold standard? Oh, you can print as much as you want. In fact, the politicians, both sides, will say, debts don't matter. Don't matter to you. They matter to us because you got to rob our productivity to do it. And neither side's going to protect you. If they did, wouldn't you think they would have fixed it by now? It's been 50 years. So all I'm saying is, at some point, the people are going to have to fix this. And how do we fix it? Well, let's take a look. Look at this. The gap between the debts and the money supply. When you have more debt in your world than you have total money in the world, you couldn't possibly pay off all the debt. There's not enough money to pay it off. Do you know what that does? It makes scarcity everywhere. There's never enough of anything. You got to fight to get this in order to make this. And that Lori and I planted a garden for the first time at our Michigan house. I think we could give every single person here a tomato and still have leftover tomatoes. I only planted 6 things. I'm just planting 6. I've got tomatoes this big. I've never seen. I just want to take people to the garden and show them this is the real world. This isn't the scarcity created by the fractional reserve banking system. There's abundance that, if you look at our property, we have a couple hundred acres just under, and we don't even have a plot that's a third of an acre. And it's like, I had a raccoon or a rabbit or something somehow get in and ate like 3/4 of my beans. I have so many beans I could give every single one, even just with the 1/4 that were left. The abundance in nature and the abundance, people would come to America and they said they would be middle class or starting to produce wealth just if they owned 40 acres of land. And they were giving away the land practically. And that's why people were leaving just to get here. Give me my 40 acres, I'll do the work and make it. Where's your 40 acres? Oh, you got a mortgage on it, you got this, because they've created a false scarcity where there's more debt than the total money. That ain't the way it's supposed to work. Here's what Satoshi said. Satoshi in 2008 said, this is a scam. This is a rigged game. The people can't possibly win it. And if you're winning it at the expense of somebody else because they made this scarcity that's false in the world. And what he said is the money supply should be absolutely steady. It should not change. And so he took a guess. He said, all right, what do I think it is? And he figured out that from the M1 here, which was currency in circulation to demand deposits, I'm not going to get into all the details, but it was somewhere around 20 to 21 trillion. And here's what he did. He created 21 million Bitcoin. Well, if you take it out to the dollar range, which remember their Satoshis goes out to the eighths, whatever, decimal, so pretty crazy stuff. But it actually ends up being 21 trillion 100-cent Satoshis. So they created a money supply that is absolutely flat at 21 trillion. So that means today, that was 2008 when it started, and they produced 19 trillion of it. So it will only ever be 21 trillion, and when you own it, nobody else owns it. And the only way they could stop it is if they shut down the internet. Do you think they're going to shut? Because remember, what is the internet? It's the decentralized flow of information. What's Bitcoin? Decentralized flow of value. They hate decentralized. Why? If it's decentralized, we can't control it. And if we can't control it, we can't do that scam that I just showed you earlier. Here's why. Because that 21 trillion says in 2020, it's 21 trillion. 100 years hence, it'll still be 21 trillion. They'll never create any more. when you hold that dollar in your hand, if tonight when they create another trillion, guess what? Your dollar just lost value. I mean, everybody, let me just explain it. If you own 50% of the stock of a company, and tomorrow some devious person doubled the amount of stock and kept it all, you would all of a sudden only own a quarter of the company. Would you call that, well, it's a liquidity crisis, he had to create some more stock? Seems fair to me. You just lost half of your value because somebody created false stock. That's what's going on with the money. It's not backed by anything. So what these guys did, I don't know if it was an individual, I don't know if it was a couple individuals, wasn't too many. But this guy was smart to disappear because he knew what would happen if he was around. He knew what they would do. It's like, man, if you try to create a money, they'd go, you can't create money. The reason why they've let this go on is because they can't figure out how to shut it down. Like, how do the only way we'd shut it down is shut down the internet. We can't shut down the internet. And so the opportunity is, all we're saying is, listen, we're not trying to be absolute radicals. We're just trying to say that when we actually earn something, can we keep it? I mean, you already are taxing us. We'll pay our taxes. And we already are. It's like, but do you actually have to inflate away 90% of our value in 50 years? Is that fair? Is that righteous? Could anybody stand up here? I would love for anybody to want to debate me on this. I like arguing. I have no problem with that. Let me tell you how early you are. And again, listen, if you don't want anything to do with Bitcoin, you can get cash back and keep running and play their game. That's fine. And you can be part of the people. So I'm not telling, I would never tell anybody. Again, I believe too much in freedom. I don't want you to ever stack sats until you understand what's going on and you can read. Chris Brady is releasing a new book called Bitcoin Bride. It's the best primer on Bitcoin I've ever read. When you read it, you'll be like, oh, that's why Orrin and Chris are up to speed. And we understand it. Took me, like I said, over 5 years to study this to get to that. So you can take your time. If you say, well, I trust you, I'm going to. But here's the thing. When you're stacking those sats, if you would have been stacking sats, if there was such a thing in 1971, do you realize you'd have 90% more value that you lost? Because they wouldn't have been able to take it from you. By the way, every time they inflate this way, the value of Bitcoin will start to go up too because they're inflating the way of the dollar. So the value of Bitcoin, which is steady against all these extra dollars, will go up over time. I understand it'll be ups and downs. There isn't anything at this stage. But this is where you are. Look at where we are here. You're like the earliest of early inventors. You're like the early innovators of this whole thing. You're like, yeah, but it's been around for a while. Yeah, but it's the earliest of early. And you can buy stuff you're doing anyway. Just one of the perks is when you went to Applebee's next time and you stocked away your 10% or 5%, whatever it is at that time, you are holding on to a value that the power structure can't touch. You're protecting yourself. Watch this. We talk about these radio. Look at how radio exploded. TV, look how it exploded. Cell phone, look at how that exploded. Internet, look at how that exploded. Do you see where Bitcoin is? So you think, oh, I was too late. Too late. How much earlier do you want to be? I like being leading edge, not bleeding edge. This is a leading edge technology that is sitting at, I don't know, 45, 46,000. And again, it's going to go up and down because the elites are like, maybe we can just inflate it and then drop it and rob the people of all their wealth. And then they'll start talking bad about it. But there's too many people that know. In fact, even some of the people that made a lot of money from that structure are starting to come over because they're just realizing enough is enough. This has gone too far. And it has gone too far. We talk about the parable of the pipeline. I just want to show you a couple things. This right here is the future for you. That when you go to bed tonight, if you can just go right to bed, I was tired, I just went to bed, didn't matter. Maybe you're okay. Maybe you're okay with that. I don't know how God built everybody, but for Lori and myself, injustice infuriates us. When we see bullies picking on people, that infuriates us. And we've always ended up, it's like when there's a bully around, it seems like the bully always ends up wanting to fight us because we don't take it. I understand this is a big bully. I understand it has a global reach. I understand all that. And so I'm not saying go out there and fight the bully. All I'm saying is you can choose to non-participate. That just as if you track your history, at some point, many of the families here, there was someone that was sitting in the old world saying, you know what, we're getting abused. Taxes are so high, I don't have any opportunity here. And somebody said there's 40 acres across that ocean. There were a lot of people that said, are you kidding me? It's across the ocean. You'd probably have to sell yourself into servitude. Who knows? Whether it was from that, or whether it was somebody being enslaved and oppressed in Africa and sent over here in chains, at some point we were all set free in America with the idea, the American ideal said, that we will judge a person not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I buy into that. I buy into the Declaration of Independence. I buy into the ideals that let every man or woman rise based upon their service to others, not their oppression of others. And every time you show this plan, you strike a chord for freedom. You stand up and be counted and say that your freedom, that somebody in your past, whether it was in chains, whether it was selling themselves into servitude so they could afford their ticket over, or whether they had enough money to make it, it still took courage to leave everything behind and come to a new world with no guarantees, only an opportunity. Have we become a people that are so scared, so oppressed, that we will surrender so meekly? Freedoms held so dear. The Life Platform is your opportunity to do something about this. Don't tell me you didn't have 5 minutes. Look your grandkids in the eye someday and say, sorry, kid, I didn't have 5 minutes for your future. I don't believe that's you. I don't believe you came here. I don't believe you bought a ticket to the major. You did that because you said, help me become the leader I know I have inside of me, that I can strike my note for freedom. That's what the 5 Ps do. 5 minutes, 5 Ps. Connect with your coach. That's team approach. We love you guys.